All right. Well, hello and welcome. So, this is episode 3, and we are going to dive a little bit deeper into the definition of leadership and some terms in alignment along what we're going to be looking at along the way. So, the first episode, we talked a little bit about like who is a leader, what is leadership, and how is that practical and applicable to people. And we mentioned a few things like stoicism and extreme ownership and some other stuff. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper with that right now. All right. So for me, like I mentioned in the first episode, I kind of worked on this definition of leadership over time. Like if you Google it, you're going to get just lots of hits on what leader is. And so the way I'm kind of defining it here is sort of like this. So definition of leadership is directing the behavior and actions of other people towards a goal or a mission through influence. And the reason why it's laid out this way is we're directing the behavior and actions of other people, right? Now, of course, there is self-leadership where you have to lead yourself and make good decisions. But what we're really talking about is influencing other people towards a goal or a mission. So we're directing the behavior towards a goal or a mission of other people. But here's the key. It's through influence. So like I mentioned in the first episode, that influence could very well be more of a coaching and a counseling and a nudging people in the right direction, or it could very well be the actual like ordering people to do something through positional authority or through force or through some other method. So this is what we mean by leadership when we're talking about leadership is influence. So John Maxwell has that great quote about leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less, right? And so if we define it this way, then every human being is actually a leader, regardless of their rank in an organization or social status or whatever it is. Every single person interacts with other people and therefore is influencing other people and is then influenced by other people. And so because of this back and forth that we have through human to human interaction, we are influencing other people to change their behavior or their actions. And in the case of an organization, we're looking at leaders who are directing people towards a goal or a mission. And hopefully that also applies on a personal level too, maybe in a family or maybe just with personal goals that you're trying to reach. So directing behavior and actions of other people towards a goal or a mission. So if you think about it, this influence thing, this study that I talked about in the first episode, where sociologists estimate that even the most introverted individuals will influence 10,000 or more people during their lifetime. So this means that every day you influence others and you are influenced by others. That means that no one is excluded from being both a leader and a follower. So that comes from Maxwell. And that is such a profound way to look at leadership, to see that we are influencing other people every single day for the good or for the bad. And there's this concept that Jocko talks about where he talks about leadership capital. And leadership capital, think of it, capital being like a monetary or a bank account where you have capital that goes into the account or is withdrawn from the account. So every interaction that you have, every influence that you put on another person, you're either adding money to that account or you're taking money from that account. And so that phrase that he uses, leadership capital, is kind of what we're talking about here through influence. If we're influencing people in a positive direction and we're coaching them and mentoring them into a more positive tactical or strategic action or decision, then we're adding money to that account. If we're causing negative interactions with other people, then we're pulling money out of that account. And, there may be some very rare occasions where you do need to pull some money out of the account. But generally speaking, every interaction we should look at as influence on the other person and kind of think about ahead of time, like, how can I have this interaction with the person in a positive way? So if you think about this, there's really nothing more important to be learning about, working on, talking about, getting better at than working on our leadership skills. Because if every single person is a leader and every interaction we have with another person, we're influencing back and forth and we're leading each other, so to speak, this really is arguably one of the more important topics to be thinking about and learning about. Another interesting way to look at leadership is that leadership solves problems. And there's a number of different sources that talk about problem solving and how to do that. But if you think about it, fundamentally, the reason why organizations have leaders is to solve problems and accomplish a goal or a mission, right? And so the problems that pop up every day, all day, are not really something that's getting in the way of our job. I mean, that's really why we exist. That's kind of the reason why we're needed. And, every person, every organization, everybody has problems. And so if you think about influence as an interaction and leadership as an interaction and problems as being kind of just ever present in our lives, if you think about it, every problem is a leadership problem and therefore can be solved, through leadership principles and tools, techniques. So it's just an interesting lens to kind of put on it. But so that's kind of the alignment all along the terms of leadership and kind of the focus on the different episodes that'll be coming up here shortly. All right, so understanding and learning how to learn and learning how to apply that learning to improve our leadership skills is really the key to everybody's moving up or key to success or whatever you want to call it, whether it's in an organization or on your own, doesn't matter, right? You're looking at leadership as influence, and we're thinking about that leadership capital. And then moving on now, we're looking at leadership as a learned skill. So Maxwell has a funny quote about, are leaders born or are they made? And he says, well, I haven't met a leader yet who hasn't been born. Just kind of a joke because everybody has to learn leadership, right? Some people might be naturally better at it than others, but it's really a learned skill. And even if you're good at it, even if it's your strength, you need to be working on it. And if it's your weakness, then all the more reason to try to work on it a little bit. And just like any learned skill, it requires effort. And I think this is a interesting place to look at. So probably anything that you've ever done in your life that you're especially proud of required a significant amount of work and effort on your part. And it probably required some sort of skill that you had to learn over time and then get to the point where you were able to do that thing that you're proud of. Generally speaking, most things that we just try and are naturally good at and don't really require any effort and really don't give us all that much result really isn't something that we're especially proud of or something like that. So leadership is a learned skill and it requires effort. So no matter where you are in your journey, whether you have a leadership word in your title or you don't, it's going to require effort and continual effort to learn and continue to develop those leadership skills. No one has arrived. No one has made it. No one knows everything about it. In fact, if anybody tells you that they have, they're probably not someone worth following or listening to. Another interesting thing about learning the skill of leadership and putting the effort in is that no one can do the work for you. So it's something that you have to actually take charge of. A good piece of advice that I was given very early on in my career was a gentleman told me one time that no one should care more about my career than I do, right? If you find that you're coaching and mentoring somebody and you're caring about their development more than they do, then it's time for a different type of conversation, right? at the end of the day, I should care the most about my own development and therefore be looking for ways to improve it on my own and kind of work on it and put that effort in. There's not going to be somebody just reaching out to me on a regular basis saying, oh, do this, try this opportunity here, take that. I have to actually go and look for that and just take it and do it on my own. So something to keep in mind, it's not always just going to, or not hardly ever going to just drop in your lap. Although if it does, hey, that's great. So next part is find a mentor and be a mentor. So now notice it just says find a mentor and be a mentor. So I'm not saying that you need to have like a Mr. Miyagi relationship with, waxing somebody's car. But what I'm talking about is I'm a firm believer that anybody can learn anything from anybody, right? You might have a situation, a boss, a coworker, somebody that you know that is just doing all the wrong things, or they're rubbing you the wrong way, or they're saying things that are bothering you. Now you've learned what not to do when you're in that position. It's still valuable to get that information. And then hopefully everybody's had the experience where they had, maybe it was a coach or a teacher or a mentor, maybe a boss of some kind that really tried to, went the extra mile and tried to help them out, gave them some good advice when they really needed it, that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. So find, maybe somebody that you really respect that's really good at being organized about things, or somebody's really good about the way they show up early for everything, or maybe there's somebody who you really like their people skills or their communication skills. Well, one person doesn't have to be your mentor for everything. Find examples of things that you like from various people maybe people that you follow, or whatever the case may be. But find these little ins on things that that you need work on, or even skills that you enjoy that you just want to sharpen even further, and find those mentors in each of those areas that can kind of help you improve in each of those areas. And then again, as you're going about this, or as people come in and out of your life and they expose things that you really don't like, you can use that still, right? There's that old saying about eating the meat and spitting out the bones, right? So find the stuff that you can absorb and that's good for you. And then the stuff that isn't, just get rid of it, right? So you just say, hey, now I know that's not what I'm into, or that's not respectful, or that didn't make me feel very good when that happened. So now I know not to do that to other people. On the same token, on the opposite side of the coin, so you want to be a mentor to people that are at various places. Everyone's at various places in their journey, and some people are going to be ahead of you and some people are going to be behind you. And that's why we should always be only comparing ourselves to ourselves and not to other people, right? If I go out for a run and I see someone else that's out running and they're going faster than me, I don't know if they just started and I've been going for an hour, or if they're just way better because they've been doing it way longer, or they have some kind of skill that's putting them, a step ahead. The point is, I don't know where they are in their journey. I only know where I am in my journey. And so I'm going to see people that need help or need a mentor and kind of be there with what I would have wanted in that situation. And so that's where we have to both find people that can mentor us in areas that we want, and then also in turn pay it forward and be a mentor to folks who are maybe a little bit further behind in their journey, or just coming up, or maybe they're a young person, whatever the case may be. Okay, so the next part is we are, the old saying on the airplane when you're getting ready to take off and they tell you about the oxygen mask and they say, hey, put your own oxygen mask on before you attempt to help someone else with their oxygen mask. Well, the reason they say that obviously is because if you're too busy helping someone else, you're going to pass out and you could die, right? So in that scenario, so you need to put yours on and then help those people around you. If they're struggling, put theirs on. So you probably heard of this. This is pretty classic in all self-help type information, but there's kind of the mind, body, and soul sections of ourselves, right? And so the idea here is that there's things that we can do in each of those three areas that will put our oxygen mask on, so to speak, that will allow us to be able to show up in order to assist other people, assist our families, do our jobs, and have some left over, right? So if we're too busy focused only on other people, we're not going to be able to be there for the long term, right? We're going to get burned out. We're going to have health problems and so on. So the mind, body, soul. So just kind of quickly, we'll hopefully throughout this series have information on all three of these areas, but starting with the body. So there's health, there's exercise, there's nutrition, there's a whole number of things. And we'll talk a little bit about that here coming up. There's the mind. And so there's things you can do there, just like you can exercise your body, you can exercise your mind by learning new things. We talked about that in episode 2, about pushing yourself, about trying things that scare you, about reading, looking into new things and taking classes, whatever the case may be, but work out your mind like you would do for your muscles. And then there's the soul connection, right? So there's your faith. There's also other things that you can do, like the grateful exercise we talked about, or meditation, or there's a number of things that you can do for your soul, right? And so those things are just as important, if not more so, than mind and body. So although all three play a part there, right? So we've got to pay close attention to all of those. Now, there's I've mentioned before, big fan of the Huberman Lab podcast, and I think Andrew Huberman does a great job of tackling scientific studies and kind of explaining what they mean and that sort of thing. Well, he's come up with, depending on how far along in his series you are, it's either the 6 or the 7 pillars of mental and physical health. And he's kind of got information on all 7 of those. I really like the way it's broken out. So, full credit to him, but these are the 7 pillars that are necessary for good mental and physical health. And the 2 are very, very closely related. So number 1 is sleep. And we're going to have an episode on sleep coming up. Getting the appropriate amount of sleep is critical both for mind and body. Number 2 is sunlight optimization, and he's famous for getting sunlight in the morning as being his number 1 thing. But in order to set our circadian rhythm, and the light and dark exposure really does matter. How much light you get in your eyes, when you get the light, and then when you get the last amount of light exposure while you're sleeping can actually interfere with your sleep, even if it's a really dim. So there's a lot going on there with light and sleep and light and health, even with like hormone release and things like that. It's really quite fascinating. Number 3 is movement or exercise. This is really critical to the body for a number of ways, and we'll talk more about that later. Number 4 is nutrition, the food that we eat. That's really critical to both mental and physical health. Number 5 is our social connection or our spiritual health, depending on what circles you float in. So that's number 5. Number 6 is stress and stress optimization. And stress can really take a toll, obviously, on your mental health, but also on your physical health too. And there's some tools and techniques for that. And then number 7 is oral and gut health. And so our microbiome in our gut and gut function, as well as oral health, that's number 7 on the 7 pillars of mental health. And so some of you might be thinking like, well, this is about leadership, right? Like, what does that have to do with health and mental health and physical health? And really it does. There's a number of things that will impact this. And we're going to take a little bit deeper dive in some of these things. So certainly not to the extent of Andrew Huberman, but kind of summarizing in some of these areas. So For example, not getting a full 8 hours of sleep can cause things like memory loss, loss of the ability to do even simple logic, basic verbal comprehension, self-control, and so just even something simple like getting short amount of sleep can actually impact decisions we're making as a leader. And there's actually some studies that showed that supervisors who got less than 8 hours sleep were actually more likely to get into altercations with their employees than if they had had 8 hours of sleep. So that's just one example, but there's many, many other examples, including, like I said, memory loss and logical thought, basic verbal comprehension. I mean, all this stuff is really important as a leader to be on top of. Another really kind of crazy statistic, according to the World Health Organization, about 80% of the top causes of death could be prevented through nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle. So you think about the top 80%, I mean, that's a lot. And that's something that as leader, we need to be thinking about. So, and then even something as simple as hydration, as part of our diet and nutrition. I mean, even being only 2% dehydrated can result in things like memory loss, attention loss, impairing coordination, and even cognitive abilities is impaired. So even just a small amount of dehydration can cause a lot of weirdness in the brain. So it really does impact us as leaders. And again, if none of that resonates, we got to put our own oxygen mask on before we can help others with theirs. All right. Next one is leadership versus management. So what's the difference between a leader and a manager? And really it's a false dichotomy. There's no either or here. Managers are usually, the term is more around planning, directing, organizing, ensuring processes are being followed, implementing new process, SOPs, that sort of thing. A leader, we talked about a lot about that. That's your people skills. That's your having respect for people. That's teaching and coaching and mentoring. Now, at the end of the day, what that means is that everyone is both a leader and a manager, right? And again, some people might be naturally better at one versus the other, but it's a false dichotomy of people saying like, well, that person's a good manager, but they're a bad leader. And so therefore they're a manager, not a leader. No, everyone is a leader. Not everyone has the word manager in their title, but everyone is a leader. The manager part is a separate skill set, right? And so a lot of times what'll happen is somebody gets really good at their job. They get promoted because they're the best at doing that job. Well, the problem is when they get into that position, that new position, they may not have leadership skills, or they might, or they may not have manager skills, or they might, but oftentimes they don't have either. And so they go from being the best skilled person at that job, and they're put into a position before they have the training on being a good leader and being a good manager. Again, nothing wrong with a good trial by fire every now and again, but it's important for everybody, including the people who are promoting that individual, to understand the fact that, hey, this is a separate skill set that we need to be helping this person develop. Just because they're really skilled at their job doesn't mean that they are also skilled at these other skill sets. And now it doesn't make them any less of a person. It just means that it's another area that they need to start working on and developing. So really important to keep in mind that leadership is a skill set, management is a skill set, and the actual technical part of your job is a skill set, but they're not the same skill set. So however much work went into learning the job skill set, the same or more so needs to go into the management side and the leadership side to develop those skills. So there's a couple of different leadership styles. Well, I should say there's more than a couple. We're going to talk about a couple. And the ones we're going to talk about first is authoritative style and coaching style. And you can probably tell just by the name that the authoritative style and the coaching style is the more, some of the things we've talked about earlier, like explaining the why, providing reasons for why we're doing things, talking about goals, allowing mistakes to be made so that the person can learn, looking for input, looking for solutions from the team instead of always having the my way or the highway type attitude. Now, the coaching style, you could probably tell by the way I explained that, is the one that I prefer, although I will say that there are very rare occasions where an authoritative style is appropriate. Now, it's probably less than 99% of people think, but one very common example is, around safety. If, someone is about to reach into a machine that could hurt their body, that's not the time to be saying, hey, what do we think about this? And why should we do that? And maybe I'll let them make this mistake. No. If it's going to hurt them, right? Or it's going to have a really huge impact on the company financially or something like that, right? That's the time to say, hey, we can't do that, or stop, don't do that. Another classic example is, a child running out into the street. That's not the time to be like, hey, buddy, let's not do that. Let's talk about this and figure out a solution. No, that's the time to say, stop, don't do that, right? And now if you do that stop, don't do it, top-down approach all the time, it doesn't have the intended effect when it's needed, versus if you are constantly in the coaching style and you're building up that leadership capital, and then all of a sudden, boom, the authoritative approach, needs to happen. Well, then it's you've made a small withdrawal, maybe, or maybe it was appropriate, and the person's like, oh, thanks for saying that. I didn't realize I was about to get hit by a bus. Like, really, really appreciate that, right? So what I'm saying is the coaching style is the preferred style, and I hope that throughout this series you'll sort of understand the reasoning behind that. There's a funny saying that from my military days that people would say, yeah, the beatings are going to continue until morale increases, right? And it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. Didn't work then, doesn't work now. The do as I say and not as I do, that's never worked, right? It didn't work when you were a kid and somebody did it to you, and it doesn't work as an adult in the workplace either. So an interesting saying, and I tried to narrow down who actually said this, but I wasn't able to get an exact quote. It was kind of attributed to several different people in several different ways. But anyways, it goes like this. People want to matter. People want to do meaningful work, and people want to see the difference that they're making. So one of the things that I do in when I'm looking at an organization, or I'm looking at a team, is I listen to their language. And so this is really important to me and to the way that I look at the world and the lens that I put on, is that language really matters. What people say is an indication of what they're thinking, and it's also an indication of their actions. Now, obviously, if you say one thing and you do another, that's different. But generally speaking, thoughts become words, and then words become actions. And so getting back to the people want to matter aspect of it and the language aspect of it is I look at the word just. So if somebody says, oh, I'm just fill in the blank with a job title. Oh, I'm just a janitor, or I'm just an entry-level employee, or I'm just whatever they're saying, is an indicator that they don't believe they're doing meaningful work. And so that's an indicator that they don't have a good leader that's guiding their actions, or coach or mentor that's kind of helping them. So people want to matter, people want to do meaningful work. So if somebody is in a job that they do not believe is meaningful, they will not be putting their 100% effort into that work, right? Nobody would. I wouldn't, you wouldn't. If you believe that what you're doing is meaningless, Now, you can always find meaning in anything. And but the job of a leader, if you have a team of people that is working for you, is to show them not only that you appreciate what they're doing and that they matter as a person, but that what they're doing is actually meaningful to the organization and to the team. And it's real easy to do that. Now, there's some people that have asked me before, like, well, how do I make like a really entry level job seem meaningful? Well, the way that you do that is by thinking about what would happen if that person didn't show up for work today. And almost every case, if somebody doesn't show up, then someone else on the team, if not the entire team, has to pick up the slack for that person. And the entire team suffers, or at least doesn't do as well as they could have if that person was there. So in the most genuine sense of the word, every single person on any team is doing meaningful work. Because if they weren't there, it would hurt the rest of the people on the team because they'd have to work harder or longer or faster or whatever the case may be to make up for the fact that that person wasn't there. Almost any organization, there's not lots of extra people just hanging around, right? Most organizations, if there's a job posting, it's because they need someone to do that. And so it's now when you're having this coaching conversation with somebody that needs to understand how critical their role is, you have to be genuine about it. And if you're not genuine, the person's going to see right through it right away, and it'll hurt the relationship more than anything else. But it's real easy to be genuine about it because all you have to do is genuinely be thankful that they showed up and are doing their job, right? Because again, what would happen if they weren't there? So this is really important. So really our job as a leader is to make sure that the people around us understand that they are doing meaningful work and that they matter, because they won't stick around too long if they don't see that as the culture of the organization. And neither would you or I in that same scenario. There's a great quote from Teddy Roosevelt that says, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And that's really what we're talking about here. So there was a speaker at a conference one time that posed this question to the group, and I really thought it was a great thought experiment, where he said, "Do you believe that everyone comes to work with the mindset that they are going to do a good job?" Now, notice he didn't say, "Does everybody do a good job?" He said, "Does everybody come to work with the mindset that they're going to do a good job?" Because what would the opposite of that be? The opposite of that would be they come to work with the mindset that they're going to do a bad job. And really, there's not nearly as many people as we think that have that mindset. Even that person that you're picturing right now, they probably don't have that mindset. Like, nobody comes to work and thinking like, "Man, I'm going to get hurt today," or "I'm going to screw things up for my team today," or "I'm really going to stick it to my boss and just not do well today." There are some people like that, but they're very rare. And if they are part of your team and that truly is their mindset, then they need to go. Simple as that. And if they're still on your team, well, you're the leader of the team, right? So it's a reflection on you that they're there, right? So if we've tried to coach them and we determine that through coaching and giving them the knowledge, skills, and opportunity to succeed that they just can't or won't, then they need to go, right? And the longer they stay after that determination has been made, the more cancerous that is to the team. Because everybody knows on the team who's not pulling their weight or who's not doing a good job. And they certainly know when somebody has a mindset that they're going to do a bad job, which again is very, very rare. But here's why it's important to go through that thought experiment with your team if you're having trouble with a team or some team members that just aren't living up to their potential. Because the way that you deal with somebody is going to be different depending on how you see them. So there's a great quote from Goth who says that the way you see people is the way that you treat them, and the way that you treat them is what they become. That's a really powerful statement, because if we picture the people on our team as coming to work with the intention of doing a bad job, then when they make a mistake, we're like, see, I knew that person was an idiot, right? Because they're kind of manifesting the way that we're kind of visualizing them in our brain. But if we see them as a person just like you or me, and we've done the truth and lies exercise with them, we've done the grateful exercise as a team, and we know that they're just here trying to provide for their family just like we are, and they have some things that they care about that are similar to some things that what I care about. We start to see them a little bit differently. And when they make a mistake, then we can look at them and be like, buddy, no, you just do it like this, right? Not a big deal. Just do it like this, right? Here's what I would do. Give them some advice, give them that mentoring, give them that coaching, right? Now, the way I like to explain it is if you have, let's say you had your all-time best friend from whenever, your all-time best friend from your life happens to work with you and they make a mistake. How would you treat that scenario? Would you help them in any way you could? Maybe try to give them some advice or try to prep them better the next time? Or, what would you do if it was your all-time worst enemy from ever and they make a mistake, right? So it's important the way that you think about the people that you work with and for and around, and understand that team mindset of the way that I see them is the way that I'm going to treat them. And then that is going to impact how they react. So real important to do that thought experiment. Do you believe that everyone comes to work with the mindset of doing a good job? It's a really, really great thought experiment. So as a leader, it's important to have a leadership ethos. So ethos is Greek for character. So it's kind of the military is kind of famous for talking about leadership ethos of like discipline and honor and teamwork, right? But ethos is a way, it's describing a way of life or a set of values and principles and practices that someone is going to kind of live by. So having that leadership ethos is, a lot of the, if not all of the leadership characteristics and principles that we're going to talk about here coming up in a future episode, almost all of them will be very similar to just the ones that you have in your personal life. But if we're looking at them with that leadership lens, then we can kind of see, okay, this is kind of the way that I live my life. It's a set of values. It's a set of principles, right? It's not just something I do for a little while. It's kind of something that I'm trying to do and continue to develop. So as we talk about that, we're going to continue to kind of refer back to character. And so that leadership ethos is a part of character, but looked at from a leadership lens. And so that's what I really find interesting, and a connection point between all these various things that we're looking at is a set of values or principles or practices that build up a person's character. So we're going to talk about later leadership traits, which are like individual things like wisdom or integrity. And then we're going to look at a set of leadership principles, which are something like know yourself or keep your people informed, things like that. So these are like best practice methods for building culture, for building your leadership capital, for building your leadership skills, for building your own personal character to be better day by day by day. And the important thing about leadership traits and leadership principles that I really like is that it's me doing it. It's us doing it, right? It's not relying on someone else to do something. We're taking the ownership, and our character is really one of the very few things in life that is under our own control and something that we can do something about right now. Start right away and see instant results, which is what I really like about that. And we'll explain what that means here later. But just like anything else, leadership traits, leadership principles, and character requires hard work and constant vigilance to keep them in constant practice. Like, remember I said, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is going to sound simple, but it's simple to say, it's hard to do, right? Something like integrity, you could explain very quickly and is very simple, but it takes a lifetime of work to continue to get better and better and better. No one just has it and is born with it and doesn't have to continue to work on it. There's a great quote that, again, is kind of from an unknown source that I really like and explains kind of what I'm talking about here. It says, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become deeds. Watch your deeds, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. And that's why I think it all starts with thoughts and words. The language really matters. I was listening to a podcast earlier by Cal Newport, who's kind of famous for the Slow Productivity book and the Deep Work book and a bunch of other stuff too. Really good information. But he had a great saying, and I don't remember if he was quoting someone else, but I'll attribute him since I was listening to it. And he kind of says, it really doesn't matter what you do today. It matters what you do over your lifetime, right? And so over the course of your lifetime, one day really doesn't make all that much difference. But what does make a difference is what you do with your day and that consistency of action, right? Thoughts, words, deeds, habits, character, destiny. So kind of connecting these two things together is like, you could say like, well, if I eat really well for one day, but I don't for the rest of my life, well, it's really not going to help. Or likewise, if I, exercise for one day, but I don't for the rest of my life, really not going to matter that much. It's the simple, consistent day to day that matters in the long term. And so how that ties into character, one decision, one thing, probably not going to be all that big a difference, but it is because it's going to become a habit and then your character and then your destiny. So really important to be thinking about. All right, another section that we're going to talk about briefly is the idea of respect for people. So Toyota is really famous for their TPS, the Toyota Production System, which is a system that has made up a lot of what is now known as lean manufacturing or lean thinking. And they have done really well historically over the last, 50, 70 years, where no matter what is happening in the economy, they make continual improvement, a little bit better each year, a little bit better each year, a little bit better each year. They've never had the huge spikes up or the huge spikes down. They're just a little bit better each year. And really that's what it's all about. That's what lean and Kaizen thinking is all about. And where people kind of make a mistake in copying Toyota, and there's hundreds of books about Toyota, about the techniques that Toyota does, the things that they do, the tools and techniques that they have. And Toyota is really all about it. They'll literally let their competition come into their business and see what they're doing. They'll show them their techniques. They're really not afraid of that. And the reason is that the people that are reading those books or going to visit and looking at their techniques, they don't have the same culture. And even if they started today working on that, it would take them so long to get to that culture point where that implementing those tools would actually make a huge difference, that Toyota will be 20, 30, 40 years down the road and off to something totally different. So people get, caught up with like the Kanban system or some thing that they do that they're like, oh, this is the secret sauce, right? But it's not. It's the culture that creates those techniques. That's the secret sauce. And so they have this thing they call the Toyota Way, and it's sort of like a house, and it kind of points towards their North Star. And the two pillars that hold up the house are respect for people and continuous improvement. So respect for people is really the fundamental role or the fundamental principle of anybody in a leadership role, is to find that respect for people. The other one is continuous improvement. That one gets a lot more press, and that one's probably one that everyone's familiar with. But it's really important to understand that those are the two things out of anything in the world they could have picked. Those two things are the things that they picked as what's important to build their culture. So the respect for people is everything. Is that how we treat people, how we talk to them. The leader's job is to be a servant leader, to serve and support the team. And by serving and supporting the people, that's showing respect for them. So even something as simple as, an unclean work environment, a dirty environment, that's not showing respect for people, right? Picking up after yourself, leaving the place better than you found it. These are things that show respect for other people. And as a leader or manager of an organization, having a clean environment not only makes it safer, but it shows respect for people. And that's really critical. And so you can always tell by going into the employee restroom what the organization thinks about their people, right? It doesn't have to be, made from marble, but it does need to be clean and functional. So continuous improvement. In case you're not familiar, is continually working to get just a little bit better today than we were yesterday. It's not about making large investments or giant leaps ahead. It's about just finding those really small, incremental improvements. So if you put those two together, respect for people and continuous improvement, you start to get the two columns that hold the building up. They also have some other things that they have that are kind of the foundation, like challenge and Kaizen. Respect is another one. Teamwork, there's other things that they have there that is in their house. But the two most important things, respect for people, continuous improvement. And that's something that can be applied regardless of the business you're in, a nonprofit, just yourself, your family, whatever it is, those two things. All right, moving on. Having a passion for learning. So we had an entire episode on learning how to learn. So this probably isn't a surprise that I had to throw this in there again, but having a passion for learning and improving yourself is fundamental to any leadership role. And just like I said last time, are readers. Really important to continue to push yourself. Now, opportunities may or may not present themselves. We got to seek them out. We got to find them. And it's going to take work and active engagement. Like going through SQ3R on a book, that takes work. That takes focus. And it's saying no to doing something else with that same amount of time. So really important to kind of put all these pieces together as we start to kind of build this puzzle here. One thing though, the point of saying this at this point is to say that there's a lot of resources out there that are free or very inexpensive to do this. So obviously there's books, and there's a number of ways you can do that. First and foremost, don't forget that physical libraries still exist. You can get a library card for free and go check out a couple books, read them, and bring them back. So it doesn't have to cost you anything. And you don't have to pay for a book that you didn't like. Go in there, take a look, read it. Also, bookstores like Barnes and Noble or places like that, you can go in, you can check out the book, stand there for 30 minutes and do the first part of SQ3R on the book to determine if it's something you're actually going to read and actually going to finish. So a lot of other ways to do that, obviously audiobooks, Kindles, things like that. Another great resource, TED Talks. If you're not familiar with TED Talks, they're really interesting. It's like a sort of a YouTube-esque thing for learning, where you go in there and you can pick a topic, and a lot of leadership stuff in there. You can pick any topic and listen to an industry expert in that field talk about something they're passionate about. And most TED Talks are really engaging. I really recommend checking out TED Talks. There's other things like Khan Academy, there's Udemy, there's edX. There's all kinds of ways that you can go to various sites and for very low cost, get access to really high quality. There's, LinkedIn Learning. There's a lot of ways you can take courses for very inexpensive, if not free. A lot of major universities are now putting out their content online, the actual like lectures and like the actual instruction part for free. And so you can go and get like Stanford or Harvard or places like that. You can go and like listen to those lectures or watch their professors teach a course. It's really, really accessible for that information now. So obviously YouTube is a great source as well. You can learn just about anything on there. What I would caution you on is be careful of things that are trying to get you to buy something, or they're kind of more focused towards like, algorithmically trying to capture your attention, but there's not really a lot of substance there. Be looking more for kind of long form discussion type things with industry experts or people who are sharing information from industry experts or whatever the case may be. But long form is generally better, books, things like that, than really short, algorithmically capturing type stuff or sales pitches, which a lot of things are. So we talked a little bit about attitude before, and that's 75-25, but attitude is really critical to be paying attention to. A positive attitude, whether it's in a personal relationship, whether it's in a workplace, whatever the case may be, a positive attitude is contagious. Spread it. Get it out there. Get it going around. But here's the deal. A negative attitude is contagious as well. And probably even more so. You always remember when somebody walks into a room and just the temperature drops like 20 degrees just because they come in there, right? Negative attitude, negative presence is contagious. There's a great quote from Henry Ford that he says, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Remember, we talked about that happiness advantage, that 31% smarter when we're in a positive state of mind than a negative, neutral, or stressed. Positive state of mind, again, like we talked about in the first episode, and a positive state of mind is a can-do attitude, not necessarily happy and bubbly and bouncing off the walls. It's a can-do attitude. Although, there's that old saying that it takes more muscles in your face to frown than it does to smile. I mean, it's real, right? All right, the next section we're going to talk about is ownership. So we mentioned extreme ownership in the first episode, but I want to just bring it up here again. Extreme ownership, Jocko Willink, I would consider that to be the first and most important book that any leader picks up to read. So I'm going to summarize it, but by no means does this take the place of reading the book. Really, really critical. Jocko also has a online learning academy that you can go to. Echelon Front has an academy that is run by Jocko and his team, and really, really good quality training. Okay, so what is extreme ownership? So extreme ownership is taking ownership of everything that is happening. The leader owns everything in their world and anything that impacts their mission. So he's got a saying that it's all on you, but it's not all about you, right? It's about the team, it's about the people, but it's on you as the leader. Now, remember, we talked about kind of things that are within our control, and there's things that are outside of our control. We're going to talk more about that later. It's a very interesting dichotomy here between owning what's happening and knowing what you control, what you influence, and what you don't control. So we're going to kind of play with that a little bit as we continue the series and kind of that two sides of the coin there, that dichotomy. So ownership is, hey, are there things that are outside my control? Yes, most things are. But what I own in that scenario is my action or reaction to the situation. And so that's really kind of how I kind of balance that. So comprised of two parts: owning the situation and then taking action. So because the leader owns everything in their world, success of their team, a mediocre performance of their team, or a negative performance of their team, or bad situation or problem, it's on the leader. It's on me. Ownership is about me. It's not about you. So we own everything. We own the good. We own the bad. We own the ugly. Own the situation, but then you have to take action. So it's not enough to say, yep, I made a mistake. That's my fault. You also have to own the situation and then take action. You have to say, yeah, that was my fault, and here's what I'm going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's what taking ownership is. So there's kind of going to summarize some of the key points of the book, although the ownership part is the most important part of that. The first one that he says is that there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. And this is a tough one. You know, when we find in extreme ownership in general, ego is a big part of ownership. When we're blaming everyone else for what's going on, that's our ego protecting us and saying, oh, it's not your fault, it's everyone else. Taking ownership is saying, okay, I don't own their reaction, but I own my reaction. So if I do this and I set myself up for the best chance of success, and my team, I set the team up for the best chance of success through training, through planning, all the stuff that we're going to talk about, and we've done our best, well, then we have to actually do the thing, right? And then there's a result. It's either good or it's kind of neutral maybe, or it's bad. And then we, as the leader, we own that. We say, okay, that didn't go so well. That's on me as the leader. I didn't train them well enough. I didn't explain it well enough. I didn't set the goals correctly. Whatever the problem was, we didn't plan ahead enough. Even if it was the weather, like some weather thing happened. Well, I didn't have a plan for bad weather, or I didn't order the supplies early enough so they'd get there in time to avoid any delays due to weather. Or, you know, hey, a tornado came through. That's not on me, right? It's an act of God, but we didn't have a plan for a tornado coming through, and that part of it is on me, right? So we got to own the situation, take action. So when we say no bad teams, only bad leaders, that is a really tough pill to swallow for somebody who does have a bad team. But I'll tell you, I've seen it personally. There's a number of examples from Jocko. A team is a reflection of its leader. And a good leader can turn around a bad team, or a supposed bad team, but a bad leader can take a great team and make it a poor team, right? Ownership is not just owning the situation with my team down the chain of command, but it's also with my peers, and then it's also with people above in the chain of command, right? And so that's a really important distinction. It's owning it all, not just downstream, but upstream as well. A really critical aspect of ownership, like I said, is that ownership is about me. It's not about other people. And a very common thing that I've heard a lot is people telling me, oh, yeah, you know, we're doing better now, but I really wish that, you know, people would just be held more accountable around here. Well, the problem with that is that's blaming other people, when what we really need is to be saying, what can I do differently to influence those people in a more positive direction? All right, so the 4 principles that he talks about, the 4 laws of leadership or the 4 laws of combat: cover and move. That's the way he explains teamwork, and there's a story behind that. You got to get the book to read it to find out what the story is, but teamwork, most important thing beyond ownership. Next one is simple, keeping things simple, clear, and concise. Explaining things in a way that resonate with people is really important. And simple plans are always better than complex plans, because simple is easy to explain, and it's easy to understand, and it's easy to pivot and adjust as you continue on, a very complex plan, you start throwing a monkey wrench in there and it just goes south really fast. Next one, prioritize and execute. That's time management, right? What's important, and then just start knocking them out, because not everything is equally important. And some things need to be done and some things don't need to be done right now. And then he has another one called decentralized command, which is leadership at all levels, which means everybody is a leader and we're not micromanaging. We're empowering the people on our team to make decisions at their level. And anytime there's a situation where they need to ask us what to do, that turns into a teachable moment and an explanation of where they're free to make decisions and where they do need to check, whether it's for funding or, some important decision. Obviously, more than one person needs to be involved. But what we want is we want free thinking, problem solving leaders at all levels. If they understand what the mission is, what their job is, and they understand that they're a free thinking, problem solving individual, right? They're a leader and they're able to execute their job, then everybody wins at all levels, right? That's really important. I've heard people say like, man, I would just really wish people would do what I told them to do. No, you don't, right? You want them to make decisions on their own, right? Did you tell them to breathe or use the bathroom? Like, we don't want to tell every little thing, because then when those decisions come up, they're just going to be like, well, they didn't tell me what to do, so I'm not going to take action here. We want them to know what needs to be done and do it without being told. If we are constantly micromanaging our teams, then that's the opposite of decentralized command or leadership at all levels. All right. And then lastly for today is going to be having a thought process, or kind of a flow chart. You think of it as a flow chart that you do in your brain when you have to make a decision as a leader. And this applies to most situations, maybe not every situation, but it's a great flow chart for thinking about the world and kind of looking at the world. And it can be done in a production environment. It can be done at home while you're driving a car, well, whatever the case may be. So the first thing is safety. So if I make this decision, are people going to be safe? Am I going to be safe? Right? If the answer is no, you need to rethink whatever your thought process you're going down. But if the answer is yes, people will be safe, then you move to the next one. Okay, quality. So it's safety first, then quality second. So quality is, if I make this decision, am I going to be making a quality product? Right? Because quality is what keeps people coming back in a business. But maybe it's not a business decision. Maybe it's something you're working on, is a project you're working on, or something that you're going to do. Quality might be kind of the level that you're doing it at. Right? Am I doing this well, right? Or is this going to be better than it was yesterday? Am I improving my skill set? Am I improving my output, or whatever it is I'm working on, right? And if the quality is going to get better, then you should do that, right? If the quality is going to get worse, you really need to step back and think about it, because in a business setting, people come back when a product is good quality or a service is something that they would do again, right? The quality of the product or the service is the most critical thing, because that's what keeps customers coming back. If it's not a business decision and it's just, hey, something that I'm working on, quality still plays a critical role. And if quality doesn't play a role, then you probably should think about whether you should be doing it or not. Next one is the flow of the process. So we talk about process management in a later episode, but process management or process thinking is the thought pattern that, or the lens, looking at the world through the lens of process, is that everything is a process. Getting in your car and driving to Walmart is a process, right? It has a start, it has a finish, and it has steps in between. You got to put your key in, you got to start the car, you got to drive the car, you got to follow a series of instructions along the way, stoplights, red lights, you got to go in a certain direction, and then you got to park, and there's a process for that. And then when you go in, there's a process for buying whatever you're there to buy. So you can see every little thing is a process, which is really interesting because if everything is a process, then that means that everything can be improved on, right? And if you understand the process, then it allows you to be able to understand managing the process or improving the process, or at least organizing the process and finishing the process, right? There's a lot of things that go into process management, and that's not the scope of what we're talking about here. So we talked about safety. We talked about quality. Next is the flow of the process. Are things going to be smooth? Are things going to be efficient, right? That's why we say flow, like water. It's like, is it going to be the proper method? Are we going to do it in the right way? We're going to follow the right steps, or are we going to take shortcuts? Are we going to skip steps, right? These are probably not things that we want to do if this is something important, right? So we're thinking first about quality. Is someone going to get hurt? Okay, no. If I continue to do it like that, will I make a good quality product or service or quality decision? If yes, all right, what is the process that I'm about to go into? Do I understand it? Is it efficient? Is it going to happen properly? Are these steps the right ones? Am I taking any shortcuts by doing this? If yes, then continue. And then the last one is waste. So waste is, there's 8 forms of waste, and we'll talk about that later. But waste is basically anything that doesn't add value, right? So if I'm doing something and it's safe, it's making a quality product, it flows efficiently, and I understand the process, and it adds value, then I should probably do that, right? But if I get through all those steps and then I get to waste and what I'm doing doesn't add value, well, then by definition, it's a waste. And you really should be thinking about, well, should I be doing that if it's a waste, right? So it's just a great 4-step safety, quality, flow, waste thought process or flow chart to think about any project, any business decision, anything like that, where you're thinking through what should I do next, and being able to explain the reasons you made those decisions is really important because, hey, people are going to ask. And if you can explain to your boss or whoever you're talking to, hey, I made that decision. It was the best I could do at the time. And here's the thought process I went through. I thought about safety. I thought about quality. I thought about the process, and I was adding value. So I went ahead and did it. So you can explain that. At least everyone will know why you made that decision. And more often than not, you'll be on the right track. So safety, quality, flow, waste, a great way to walk through a decision-making loop and think about the process from kind of all the big important areas. Okay, so that wraps up for episode 3. Really appreciate everybody who stuck through it and is still listening. And we'll see you on the next one.